It is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to BASW England's World Social Work Day event today. The event is focusing on the value of connectedness in our communities. I'm Katie Jackson. I am the Vice Chair of the National Standing Committee for England. So, as you can see, we have several panel members joining us for our session today who will be speaking to the theme of this year's event. So we've got Donna Edgley and Sarah Coogan-Hill from Pennine Care, and we've got Vivian Cooper, Coral Histad and Emma Austin-Garrard from Challenging Behaviour Foundations, and presentations are not biased at all. They are really, really good, so really looking forward to getting stuck into them. So to get things started then, we have Donna Edgley and Sarah Coogan-Hill from Pennine Care NHS Foundation Trust. At Pennine Care, they provide mental health, learning disability and autism services to people in Greater Manchester and beyond, and cover a wide range of conditions and run many services to support those in need in their local communities and further. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Donna and Sarah to start their presentation about Pennine Care.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having us on this amazing afternoon. We really appreciate supporting this, and I'd like to open up by introducing myself. I'm an operational and clinical lead for physical health and treatment across Pennine Care. And first disclosure of the afternoon, I'm not actually a social worker. So I would apologise if I start sounding a little bit clinical and a little bit nursey, because I am one. So there's the first disclosure for this afternoon, but I really feel privileged about being part of your afternoon and sharing with you what we have been doing within Pennine Care. Next slide, please. So within Pennine Care, we were very lucky to have had 2 pilot sites which were able to take advantage of the green space funding from NHS England. The pilot sites were Bury and Rochdale, and they were limited in funding and with time as well. Next slide, please. However, we were able to make a difference in each of the boroughs and support our patients, and we had a focus on our early intervention teams. So the 2 pilots were working with identified organisations within each of the boroughs, and I'll talk about the one that was happening in Rochdale, and Donna will be talking about the one happening in Bury. But we sorry, that pinging's just interrupting my thought processes. The HRT doesn't accommodate it. But we were able to offer 2 comparison pilot sites within our organisation. Next slide, please. So the green space pilots, we decided to focus on our early intervention pathways. So those are patients who are 14 years and upwards who are experiencing their first episode psychosis. But also they also had additional comorbid long-term conditions, which we do find within our early intervention cohort. That's quite prevalent. And this from a very much of a medical and clinical aspect, I was very interested in, but also from the social aspect of ensuring that our patients were able to then connect with all other elements within our communities. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand you over to the delightful Donna Edgley, who will introduce herself and be able to tell you about what the offer was in Bury.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Sarah, I'm absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon to speak to you about what we've been getting up to in Pennine Care. Unlike Sarah, I am a social worker, extremely proud of it. I was an AMP for many, many, many years, and I'm now the service lead for adult community mental health in Bury. So that's the early intervention team in psychosis. the CMHT for people of working age, and our CERN pathway, which is for people with complex emotional and relational needs. So it's quite a wide brief, and this is just part of it. So basically, as Sarah's alluded to, we've done a brilliant piece of collaborative work with Lancashire Wildlife Trust. Their background has been working with CAMS, people from CAMS services. So this was the first time they had an opportunity to work with adults with mental health problems. They've got a dedicated nature and wellbeing service, and they operate this service out of a local nature reserve in Bury. It is a closed group. It's for an 8-week duration, and we have different activities that go on throughout the year, depending on what our service users want. It also aligns with the local authorities' Let's Do It strategy. I'll come on to that in a bit, because that's really, really important, because this is one partnership between Pennine and the Lancashire Wildlife Trust, but actually it's feeding into another partner, Bury Council, which has been really, really important for us. So it's supporting people to connect with nature. And we all know that there's lots of evidence out there to say that being out in the open, being in a natural environment is really beneficial for your health, both physical and mental. It's also supported our people to be able to manage their own well-being at their own pace, because we are talking about people who, from the early intervention team, are at the beginning of their illness, but we're also talking about people in CMHT who have had longer term conditions, and the negative impact of their illness is far more prevalent. So this is about people being able to work at their own pace. They don't need to feel de-skilled, and they can organise themselves along with the staff from CMHT or EIT and the Wildlife Trust staff to just do things that will help them but not feel under pressure. So in terms of the Let's Do It strategy, the really nice thing about this project has been we've used a local nature reserve. So this is about people in the strategy using their own resources in their own neighbourhoods. It's about community participation, about people feeling a sense of belonging. That doesn't always happen in mental health. So for us to be using local assets that everybody can have access to has been a real positive aspect of this project. It's normalising mental health. It's people getting out in the community. And I think Sarah would agree with me, I'm sure, that one of the key features of this has been the willingness from the Lancashire Wildlife Trust, who are not mental health practitioners, to understand our client group and to be so compassionate and caring about their needs. That's been at the forefront of everything they've done, and we really do need to applaud them for that. Next slide, please. So the offer. So the World Health Organization is saying that mental health encompasses emotional, psychological and social well-being. That influences our cognitions, our perceptions and our behaviour. So the 5 ways to well-being was a perfect tool for us to use for this particular project. So we've all heard of mindfulness. This gives us a sense of safety, this project. People are there in a non-judgmental environment where they can just be themselves. That's not always the case with people with severe mental disorder. Their social functioning can be severely affected and they don't feel comfortable socialising with people. So being in an environment with people with similar issues has been something that has been very new for them. It's a very calming atmosphere, although it's re-energising as well. They can learn new skills, they can revisit old skills, and they can take notice of the world around them. Mindfulness is about giving your mind a rest. So if I said to you, oh, can you hear that noise? And you said, what noise? And I said, listen, try and listen. Those few seconds when you're straining to try and hear that noise, you're not actually thinking about anything else. You're just focusing on trying to hear that noise. And that's the essence of mindfulness. And that's what we were trying to do with people throughout this project. Connecting with other people. It's about building and maintaining relationships. People with longer term mental health problems do have a problem sometimes in building relationships because they haven't maybe had the social skills, they haven't had the money to go and socialise, they haven't had the opportunities that the rest of the population have had. So being able to do that has been really key. Giving back to nature and others. We all know that being in nature reduces stress, worry, anger. So if people are feeling that, then they're going back to their families and their friends, and they're having better relationships. Learning new things with a sense of purpose, and being physical, being outdoors, natural light, lots of vitamin D being boosted in these sessions. And it also helps to regulate people's circadian rhythms for sleep, which is really important for people. It also appeals to the wider MDT. So we've got psychologists, social workers, nurses, doctors, OTs on our team, and all of them have noticed they've been out on these projects. They fight with each other every week because it's so good and it's so enjoyable that they want to go and support it. So from a social care perspective, the social workers are delighted that people with these problems are engaging in community assets that everybody else can engage in. The nurses are finding that people have a reduction in symptoms, which is absolutely wonderful. And OTs are delighted because people are getting engaged in purposeful and meaningful activity, which they're really enjoying. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of the sorts of things that they do. There are loads of things that they do. And when the weather is not on our side, there is a space that they can go indoors and they can do things. There's a real focus on practical tasks, and that is really important, that it helps people to focus their thinking. It's very purposeful and it gives them a sense of achievement, and that's what we're finding. Next slide, please. So in terms of our feedback, we collated data. We had 2 questionnaires that we did, one at the beginning of the sessions and one at the end, and then a group questionnaire, a group session questionnaire. And you can see here some of the feedback that we've had. What's really important is the social aspect of building confidence, forming friendships, reducing social isolation, which can be a huge factor in mental health. And it can be a springboard to other things and to better things for people, where they've now started to use more mainstream leisure centres, go swimming, going to walking groups. So it has been a springboard for people. Next steps for us around this was, as Sarah said, we started off with the early intervention team. We then expanded it to the community mental health team, and we're now wanting to expand this further into the older people's CMHT, so we could provide a service for people who maybe have organic mental health problems of older age. And their carers, we could do things for them together, or we could have a bespoke offer just for carers to give them a bit of respite as well. So I'm going to pass you back to Sarah in a second, but before I do, I want to share with you a really lovely video that we've got from the Early Intervention Service. As I said, this can be a springboard to other things, and we have a lovely young man here who has been a part of our service, who's now actually found a role as a volunteer within Pennine Care. So I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll be passing you back to Sarah afterwards.
Hello, I'm Andre Tolka. I'm from Berry, and I am with the early intervention team. My GP referred me to Healthy Minds, and Healthy Minds referred me to early intervention team because I have some mental issues, psychosis, something like that. And I am quite happy right now because I'm getting help. I'm getting the support I need, I think. First time I found out about 10 months ago, maybe a year ago, to be honest, through Ellen, my key worker. She asked me a few times, maybe even 10 times, if I want to do group sessions like that, and I always said no. And I was feeling bad by saying no all the time because Ellen became like a friend to me, and I knew she wanted to help me, and as well I knew I have to start doing something to change, to see some change. So I said, yes, if you knew me 3 years ago, I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk on that. It did improve my, I'm not scared now to go out. I'm not scared to do new things because it always ends up being okay. You know, it's just I needed to show that it is okay to go out, it is okay to be around people. After a few sessions, I've realized that when I'm there, the voices are very silent. You know, I can't hear them. It was weird. I don't know why it is like that, but I think it's maybe because I enjoyed being there so much, and I didn't have time for anything else in my head. You know, I just had fun, and that was it. And after four sessions, I've realized I feel like I'm healthy. You know, and after I become ill, I didn't go out for 5 years. So going out after 5 years to the park, this is different. It it showed me how much I missed nature and how much I enjoyed it. And seeing animals, seeing the trees without leaves, then you see them again and they've got leaves. It is nice to see that. It will make you feel different and you will see the change as well. I do like the experience and I hope I will have a chance to do more.
I think everybody would agree that's quite a profound
Hello,
little
Andre.
video. Do you want to put the next slide on for me, please?
Talker.
Oh,
I'm
great, and thank you. It makes me understand why I come to work on a daily basis. But I think it was quite a profound to listen to him, that a gentleman who hasn't been out for 5 years managed to get out and do something along those lines. And he's moved on into doing something else with his life, and he's being productive and supportive to enable that to happen. As Donna said, I'm going to focus on the other offer that we had with him, which was slightly different within Rochdale. And we work with our partners who are Petrus. They have a lot of social prescribing groups. They have a lot of offers within the community and are very community based. So the offer was slightly different. It wasn't a closed group like we had in Bury. They had specific workers which were connecting our patients to access that group, and worked with our early intervention again to enable that to happen, and work very much as a collaborative to support that person to gradually enter into a group, but then also stay within that group with the support from Petrus. The offer was around supporting them to manage their own well-being, and that's physical, mental health, well-being. As Donna alluded to, we know that blood pressure changes happen when you're in green space. There is evidence out there, and it's very much evidence-based, all the elements to do with the physical health, but also the information around mental health, which supports somebody's mental well-being. And I think we've just seen some of that in the video before. It also it acts as a springboard into other social prescribing and groups within the community, and gave them very much a grounding within that community and a sense of being within a community and a sense of being part of other things and not being reliant on mental health services to help them to move forward. So the link workers worked together with Petrus. We had our workers within early intervention who were experts within that SMI provision, but then we also relied on our partners from Petrus to give us that information about what was in the community. I think sometimes when we're working very much within a team, we're not able to see what's around us, that social prescribing element, those resources which do change on a regular basis. And they were very much embedded in that and were able to support us into accessing it. One thing that Petrus were able to do as well, they supported our patients and our people with transport and clothing and appropriate clothing. We found that when people were coming to these groups, they didn't have appropriate footwear that kept their feet dry. They weren't able to provide themselves with clothing that enabled them to stay dry whilst they were working on the allotments in the rain. So that supported us and supported the person to be part of it and not feel as though they were stigmatized because they didn't have the right equipment, they didn't have the right support to get there. Next slide, please. So within Petrus, their activities were around allotments. They had allotments in several places within the Rochdale area. They worked on green art activities as well, painting and crafting. So it wasn't just very focused on being, gardening. There were other activities, but very much grounded in green space. So all the activities took place on the allotment. They did other things which played to that person's strengths or what they wanted to do to act as a conduit into other activities. They provided nature walks, and those nature walks were could be gender specific. They also offered walks which were led by somebody who spoke their language as well. They were multilingual offers within Petrus. I love the fact that when you go into Petrus, the main site, that they have word of the week and people are invited to write what that word is in their own language on that board, or are supported to write that word on that board. And it will be words such as chives or, plants, something along those lines, are very much embedded in the green space sort of ethos. They were supported to do other things such as making bird boxes and also poetry, similar to what we had within the Lancashire Wildlife Trust. And as I said, there were sessions which made people feel safe and psychologically safe within those environments, which is very, very important to our patient cohort. Next slide, please. So the feedback that we got from some of our patients who experienced it was they felt as though it was supporting them with their stress levels. We know the stress vulnerability models. If our people are feeling under stress, they're more likely to exhibit symptoms and so on. And it also gave them a meaning to their week, some structure, which supported them to feel as though they've got some meaning and gave them some sense of purpose. It enabled them to be physically more active without even, if we went to somebody and said, would you like to do some exercise? I mean, I'm in that cohort which will go, I don't think so, thank you very much. But if we said, would you like to be, do some plants, plant out some seeds? Would you like to help us dig over this plot? It's a different sense of activity and makes it and wraps it up into a different parcel, which gives them something that is perhaps more acceptable. It allows them to connect with other people. And I think one of the profound things that I got from one of the feedbacks was I'd made a friend. Our patients are quite isolated. They don't mix naturally with other people. It is difficult for them to find those community spaces where they feel as though they belong. And even though these were mixed groups, they still felt as though they belonged, as though they were all coming in on a level playing field. They didn't feel different. And as you can see, met some nice people, and it felt like a community to them. They felt safe within that environment. Next slide, please. So the achievements, as you can see, there's one of our workers that was doing the connecting, Jane, and she is with Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Rochdale, who came down to visit the project because it was so significant. And some of the things that they were, that people felt as though were an achievement for them, it was growing their own food. It was that spade to fork kind of process that perhaps they weren't aware of, but also healthy eating, having that effect on their own sense of well-being, having their own patch that felt as though it was theirs, as though they could take care of it. Put water in the patches and helping weeding and maintaining gardens. So there was all elements within that green space. And they did put down that meeting Andy Burnham was part of an achievement. Bless them. Next slide, please. So those were the two starting blocks that we've got within Pennine. We are working with other agencies throughout Greater Manchester, and we have, funnily enough, I was writing a letter of a supporting letter about a next wave of funding that's coming down from NHS England, which we hope will see some of the other pathways being funded, and is specifically around SMI. As Donna alluded to, we want an all age offer. We don't want just kids and adults. We want to make sure our older adults also feel as though they have a place within those green space environments. And it's really important to, enable people and not create those barriers. We have an allotment that we are starting to develop with one of our partners, Groundworks, and we're just on the starting blocks, but the project will then feed into all of our other boroughs, not just with enabling people to work on gardening, but also the plants that we grow within our allotment will then feed the other boroughs to enable them to start planting and growing near them as well. So we've kind of got a sustainability element as well as, improving people's well-being. We also are hoping that not just on a green space, especially looking at the things we're growing, we want to work with some of our other partners, and we've got them lined up, funnily enough, about how we can do sustainability cooking, especially in this environment where people do not have, the cost of living has gone absolutely off the rails, and enabling people to do sustainable, affordable, healthy eating. And this is going to be part of that pathway in those networks. I've got a feeling that might be our last slide. But I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate what we've been able to get hold of and work with our partners within Greater Manchester. It's been an exciting prospect, and I hope that you feel the same and getting those projects off in your areas, because they are interesting and everybody loves them, and it supports not only the people we work with, but also supports our staff to think about things in a different way and to think about well-being in a different way. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Donna. It's just amazing to hear about that work that's going on in Rochdale and Bury, and I'm hoping from the reactions I'm seeing, everyone seems to have engaged with that really, really well, and hopefully people feel inspired to look at this in their own areas as well. So thank you for that. We'll explore this a little bit more in the breakout groups as well, with some of the questions. Next, we have Vivian Cooper, Coral Histed, and Emma Austin Garrett from Challenging Behaviour Foundation. The Challenging Behaviour Foundation is a registered charity that was founded in 1997 by Vivian Cooper OBE, the parent of a child with severe learning disabilities whose behaviour challenges. At CBF, they provide information, support, and run workshops to help make a difference. So I'm going to hand over to CBF to undertake their presentation now.
Thanks very much, Katie. As you've heard, my name's Viv Cooper and I'm a family carer. I have a son who has severe learning disabilities, who displays a range of behaviours described as challenging. And I'm CEO of the small but national charity called the Challenging Behaviour Foundation. And I'm here with my colleagues Coral and Emma, who are going to briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Coral. I'm an adult policy lead at the CBF, and our colleague Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma. My brother Ben has a learning disability and is autistic. For work, I work for MenCap as families lead, but I work very closely with the families that both MenCap and CBF support.
Thank you. And so we're going to take it in turns. I'm going to start and then Emma and Coral are going to speak to some slides. So we've just heard a great example of community participation, how important local community is for people and the difference that it can make for all of us to be part of our local community. But we know that not everyone is currently able to experience the clear benefits of community living. And we're going to share the work that we're doing to identify what actions needed to enable people with learning disabilities to live good lives in their local communities. So can I have the next slide, please? So as Katie said, the Challenging Behaviour Foundation is a small but national UK charity. We provide information and support to family carers of children and adults with severe learning disabilities and behaviours that challenge. And alongside this, we work in partnership to strategically influence policy and practice. So this includes bringing together and coordinating a multi-stakeholder group of family carers, people with learning disabilities, clinicians, providers, researchers, professionals, charities and others who all work together so that that group of people with a learning disability whose behaviours challenge, can live good lives with the right support in their local community. As I said, our focus is on the needs of children and adults with severe learning disabilities who also display behaviour described as challenging. This means that individuals often have little or no speech and require support with everyday tasks such as washing, dressing, eating. In addition to these needs, individuals can display challenging behaviour. Challenging behaviour is a widely used term, but in the field of learning disability, it has a very specific definition. It's behaviour that puts the person or those around them at serious risk of harm, or which limits their access to ordinary community facilities. So challenging behaviour can be, for example, hurting yourself or others, eating inedible objects, breaking furniture or objects, smearing or spitting. There is always an underlying reason for these behaviours, and we need to find out what that is so that we can do something about it. These behaviours usually represent a person's best way of communicating an unmet need. For example, physical pain such as toothache. So the answer is not to try and stop the behaviour, which might be hitting their head against hard objects by putting a helmet on them or through other restrictions, but to address the underlying cause. And in this example, it would be toothache. And sometimes you have to be a bit of a detective to try and find that out. In daily life, this has a major impact. The behaviour puts the safety of the child or adult or others around them at serious risk and prevents them from accessing ordinary everyday activities that the rest of us take for granted. It means there's a negative impact on their quality of life, including an ordinary family life and access to the community life and services. People are often restricted and excluded because of their behaviour. But it doesn't have to be like this. We know that with the right understanding and support, people can participate in community life. As we've heard already, the huge benefits this can have for all of us. Next slide, please. We asked families with children with severe learning disabilities whose behaviour was described as challenging what their hopes and aspirations were for their children and what they wanted to see put in place. So this vision graphic was produced from their collated responses. You will see that they want what all of us want, and the only difference is that they need more support. you can see that they had lots of ideas about how to make this a reality. And these included early intervention, a key worker, which could be any professional, for example, a social worker, to help them navigate through the system. They wanted a joined up approach. They wanted access to local community services and a focus on outcomes, having a good life. Next slide, please. I'm handing over to Coral now.
So we've heard earlier about the importance of being part of your local community, and we've put this diagram together to illustrate what good community support looks like for children, young people and adults with learning disabilities. People with learning disabilities have the same needs and rights as all of us, everyone else, to be part of their local community. So that's their access to education, health, work and leisure facilities. It is important that support and services are put in place to make this right a reality for people with learning disabilities. It may mean that people may need specialist support, but this should be provided within their local community. Unfortunately, we hear far too often that these services and support are not always in place, and children, young people and adults with learning disabilities are unable to access their local community and end up being isolated and removed from it, sometimes having to move many miles away from their local community, family and friends. And I'm going to hand over to Emma, she'll tell us a bit more about this and what it means for people.
Next slide, please. So we know from the people that we support and work with, that people with learning disabilities are not always able to have a good life in their local community, and there's a number of reasons for that. So not listening to people with learning disabilities and their families. So families very often know their family members best, but their voices are quite often lost in the system. Therefore, people with the learning disabilities voices are even more lost in the system that fails to hear them already. There's a need for early intervention. And at the moment, there's a focus instead on crisis and not prevention or early intervention. So the system is set up in a way that means that people often have to get to crisis before they're eligible for support. Providing good support early on prevents crisis and stops the need for that support being more significant than it needs to be. And there are negative impacts of that on everyone, obviously on the person themselves, on their access to the system and on their families. There needs to be an access to speech and language support, so helping people to actually communicate their needs, and behavioural support to help people, as Viv said, to understand the underlying causes of behaviours, and to support people to with those behaviours going forward as well. There's a need to get the right support, but at the moment funding is being spent in the wrong places. So trying to fit people into existing services instead of thinking of ways in which they could the services can fit around them. There's obviously a need for funding to do that, and at the moment funding comes from different parts of the system, and it's complex and complicated for people to get the right support. And there is a huge lack of coordination and consistency. The impact of that, unfortunately, if the needs of people with a learning disability are not met in their local community, they can end up being detained in an inpatient unit under the Mental Health Act. These units restrict the person, are unlikely to be in their best interest, and can be long distances away, as Viv said, from their family, their local communities, their friends, and everything that is familiar to them. It can be really difficult for a person to get back home from an inpatient service. So my brother, as I said, has a learning disability. He's autistic. He spent 11 months in an inpatient service because his needs weren't met in the community. The impact of that on him has been so far, he was 18 when he was admitted to a unit. He's in his 30s now, and has been so far lifelong in terms of his needs not being met in the unit. He was actually abused in the unit that he was in, and he's hugely traumatized by the relatively short, in terms of the average length of stay period of time that he spent in an inpatient service. So there are huge barriers to people living a good life in the community and a huge need to change the system to work forward from that. Next slide, please. So we asked people with learning disabilities who were in inpatient units what it was like being in an inpatient unit. This slide shows what a group of people with a learning disability responded to that question. We heard from them that it is not where they wanted to be. They felt hopeless, that no one cared and nothing was going to change. A lot of people are in hospital for a long time just because they're waiting for somewhere. They don't have anywhere else to go. So there's a comment reflecting that. And they shared how they found it really restrictive and led to being institutionalized, which makes it even harder to return to the community where they belong. And there's a comment on the screen there saying, "I am not doing what I should be doing in life." Next slide, please. So this same group of people from the previous slide are now living successfully in the community. They shared with us how important it is for them to live a good life in their local community. And you can see from what they've said on the screen, the difference that living in the community makes for them. They have good support in their local community, which means that they have a good life, and that's reflected in the way that they talk about themselves and their lives. They're happy, they're doing things they enjoy, and they're developing new skills. And as I said, so my brother was previously in an inpatient unit for 11 months. He has now lived in the community successfully for 6 years. He has been quite fortunate in terms of the adaptations made around him to allow him to live in the community and to allow him to live successfully in the community. Those adaptations that we spoke about earlier that are very uncommon have been put in place for him. And again, you know, the reflection of that on him is that he lives in his own home with a dog, with the support that he needs. He accesses his community regularly. He regularly tries to steal other people's dogs and walk them down the street. He enjoys his life. He lives next door to people who enjoy having him around, and it has been massively important for him and his mental health. But it has also been really important to us as a family. It's allowed us to move forward as a family to support him to live the life that he deserves rather than to live in the past, and in a really difficult past for him and for us. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of my brother. And as I said, after years of isolation, community is absolutely central to his healing and his ability to thrive. The various things that Ben needs to be able to live in the community are actually really basic. He has a dog. He is technically an autism assistance dog, although he has been thoroughly untrained by my brother, and very quickly untrained by my brother in record time. So he is essentially, you know, Ben's best friend and a family pet. And he makes a huge difference to Ben's life. There are basic things about Ben's home that are really important to him. So as I said, he has a normal house on a normal street. He has next door neighbours who keep an eye on him and who care for him and about him. He has a really good staff team and a really important staff team who have been carefully selected to work with Ben and who were supported to understand the trauma that Ben has experienced and the things that Ben needs to do in order to express himself adequately in that situation. So it's fairly basic stuff. It's not rocket science, but it does require person-centered thinking, and it does require that Ben is at the absolute center of his own world, as he should be. Next slide, please. So we asked people who have been in inpatient units what needs to change. And we can see from what's been shared here that it's really important that people work together, including with people with a learning disability and their families, to enable people to live good lives in their local community. The right support needs to be in place at the right time and in the right place. And it's so important that we do this. So as you can see, there are various comments on screen, but really key to this is not just thinking about the risk of doing something, but also the risks of not doing it. So what are the risks to people's lives of ending up on a different path? And those are significant, as I've illustrated. Ben's story is sadly not remotely unique. The system fails people with a learning disability on a daily basis and shoehorns them into services that aren't appropriate on a daily basis. And there is a huge risk of that to them as human beings and as people who deserve to be part of their community, but also to the people around them, to their families, and also to the community. We are, if we don't have people with a learning disability as part of our communities, then we are losing out on what I have always experienced as the sister of a person with a learning disability, and the brilliant person that Ben is, and the brilliant people that he has grown up alongside as well. So we're missing out on that. But as you can see, there's a lot about investing in early intervention, early support, different parts of the system working together, and obviously in your roles you'll be key to that as well. Having patience and belief in people that they can do something and that they can believe in themselves. Consistency, and really importantly, building relationships. So as social workers, you may well be a huge part of that, a huge part of someone's life for a good amount of time, and that consistency and that ability to build relationships with people and their families is really important. Next slide, please, and I will hand on to Coral.
Thanks, Emma. So we've heard that the current situation means that people with learning disabilities are not always able to live good lives in their local communities, and this is not right and needs to change. So what have we been doing about it? So we're just going to share a bit about what we have been doing about it. And we have been working with family carers, people with learning disabilities, and people working across the system to co-produce an action plan that will address the issues that are currently making it difficult for people with a learning disability to get the support that they need to be able to live good lives in their local communities. So this action plan, which has had input from a wide range of people and with many different perspectives, includes actions for individuals, localities, and national actions around all the elements that need to be in place. So this includes person-centred support, supporting families, having a skilled supportive workforce, including a multidisciplinary local learning disability teams, housing, health, advocacy, early intervention, transition, and growing older. Now, this action plan will work aims to bring together all the parts of the system and the people within it to work together in a coherent and coordinated way to deliver good outcomes for people in their local communities. So next slide, please. So we've shared here a QR code so you can find out a bit more about the action plan, and we really encourage you to do that. Please take a look, let us know what you think, ask any questions, share what you're doing. We want to hear from you. We want people to be involved in this. This is a piece of work that everybody can be involved in, and we'd really like you to input into it too. So I'm just going to finish up by handing over to Emma.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Coral. So just to end on a quote that one of the people with a learning disability shared with us, when you're a person or a family member trying to get the system to work for you and to help and support you, it can feel really difficult and complicated, and that's probably an understatement. But we need to remember that we are all working for the same thing, for people to have the good lives they have a right to have. And this was summed up by one man just like this. So just to be there for us, not against us. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I was so engrossed that I actually forgot to unmute and put my my camera back on. Thank you so much, Vivian, Coral, and Emma. And yeah, it's a real stark reminder, that quote at the end, just be there for us and not against us, that we all have a role to play in this, don't we? And we all have a role to play in supporting people to be part of their communities. And just want to thank you, Emma, as well. You've brought this to life so well in sharing your family's experience and Ben's experience so generously. So thank you for that as well. So we're going to explore this a little bit more now in breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is we're going to disperse into breakout rooms. We're going to have 3, and we're going to have discussions in smaller groups, and we're going to pose a couple of questions to you. So hopefully you're up for being engaging with us and having those conversations. And then one person from each room is going to feed back when we come back together. Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
I think there's still some people being pinged back. We got pinged back mid-conversation.
Yes.
I'm sure you all did as well. So
Yes.
just give it a couple more seconds for people to be pinged back. And then we'll. So I hope that everybody's had really rich discussions in their groups. I know in ours we had some really rich discussions, and we were just sort of talking about what we were going to take away from this as well. So hoping that you all managed to get to that. So in terms of feeding back, then we're going to have one person feedback from each room, just a couple of key points that were taken from the room, and then we're going to close after that. So Liz, you're from breakout room 1, so would you like to go first and feedback from group 1?
I would, and like you, we were cut off mid flow and just really getting into the issues. So apologies to everybody in my group. But we did have some really good reflections, good discussions, and lots of experience in the room from people working with different individuals and groups of people. I think I'd like to share one of the challenges before kind of coming to some of the ideas that were shared, really. And that was really about the current climate of limited resources, but also the pressure on social workers as a resource, really, and kind of that whole culture around performance management, which can often inhibit and prevent the ability of social workers to build those relationships, which we know are absolutely key to creating the change and creating those community connections. So thank you to social worker in our group who shared that honestly around the impact that that's having on these kind of arbitrary time frames. So some of the things that we thought might be helpful in some of that is how can we utilize what's there already. So thinking about particularly for social workers in statutory settings, thinking about how we could utilize maybe some of what's in the quality assurance framework from the Care Quality Commission to challenge where people aren't being supported to find those kind of community-based solutions, to build relationships, and to be outcome focused is one of the things that we talked about. One of the other things that we talked about was about knowing what's going on in your local area, understanding what services are there, what's missing, where the gaps are, so that there can be conversations maybe with commissioning colleagues, knowing about how to maybe access grants, so that you could talk to local organisations about whether they can offer some of those kind of support services and create those kind of community connections was another idea. And particularly for people with autism, this idea around small group work and group activities that maybe don't exist within communities now, but looking at what the models have been shared today, that might be a possibility. And we also talked about the importance of, for those people who are in kind of inpatient settings as well, quite often those settings are in grounds, gardens, that people are not being supported to access, and people are often given that label of not allowed to go out. There's a real need for us as social workers to challenge where that label or statement has been applied to people, and really think about what we need to do to work back from that, so that people can access those spaces and their local communities, and really thinking about that role of social prescribing, not just as an outreach service, but as an in-reach service as well into those settings. If you've got those services in your local area, why aren't they able to kind of work with people who are in inpatient settings as well, and other conversations that we can have around that? Hopefully I've captured most things. If not, please group 1 pop things in the chat because we can pick them up from there, and thanks to everybody that contributed.
Brilliant. That's
Great.
really, really great. Thank you, Liz. And so many great ideas there, and sort of pledges that people can take away, even who weren't in that group, can take away some of those ideas potentially in their practice as well. So fantastic. Room 2, we're going to come to you now. I think that's Denise. Are you happy to feedback?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Again, there was some really positive feedback in terms of we had some examples shared with us. But before that, I think one of the things that with the group wants to note really was around how inspiring some of what they've seen today was, particularly in terms of that last quote that we had around "for us, not against us." And I think we can all say that the video that Pennon shared really touched quite a lot of people in terms of, you know, it offers a lot of hope at times when perhaps people feel like, you know, it's an uphill battle to try and, you know, maybe improve services or ensure that people are receiving what they need. So I think that offered real sense of hope to everybody that was in the group. In terms of some of the positive examples we were hearing from somebody in the Lincolnshire area was describing a Futures for Me team, which I think, if I understood correctly, and Polly, feel free to jump in if I have misunderstood, but I think it may be for young people leaving care, or more generically young people. But what they were describing was a model there that offers kind of a very tailored support with the option of one-to-one to try and encourage people into sport who may not otherwise access it. And some of that may have been things like use of therapy dogs to encourage people to go for walks. And I think the other thing that people were kind of really impressed with was the kind of very discreet kind of focus around activity. Let's not call it exercise, let's call it activity, and how things like the use of the allotment was providing physical activity for people who might not otherwise be inclined to maybe participate in some of the more formal or the traditional routes of physical exercise. You know, we're not going to get into a gym, but we will get digging on that allotment like you described, Sarah. So I think that really resonated for people. In terms then of kind of taking action to overcome barriers, some of the things we were kind of discussing were around creative commissioning, again going back to those relationships, making sure that actually you know who you need to link in with within your organisation or wider your local community, in terms of who, perhaps if this is something you're interested in taking forward, when you go back to the office, back to work, and you think, well, actually I don't even know where to start with this. I've heard stuff today that's inspiring, but I don't know what I do with that next. Well, actually maybe a commissioning team might be a good place to start if you're working in a local authority, because for many that they will know what other groups are out there, or they'll know within your local authority actually what other teams maybe you could link in with. So being aware of kind of some of that central government funding that's available, which depending on the organisation you work in, you may be precluded from applying for that, but actually you can support others in your community to apply instead who they may be eligible, and you can support people that way by signposting. And we will be sharing resources, a list of resources after the event. But yeah, also in terms of things like trying to bring people together, make sure that you know you're bringing people along with you to create change, and that actually those other organisations, we were hearing from people that other organisations are really willing to engage and really willing to change how they do things in order to affect change and in order to kind of provide something locally, but they may not be aware of what's needed. So actually sometimes it's you being that signpost, or you being that advocate, that voice is something that you can do. One of the things we did hear that causes difficulties is the short-term element in terms of funding, and particularly around grant funding, that can make it difficult to make something sustainable long-term when you don't know kind of year on year whether or not the money's going to be there. But I think the biggest thing that we came back from this was around kind of connection with people, connection with, you know, whether that's other groups, whether that's other organisations, people within your organisation, but most importantly, connections with the people who are going to be using the various different whether they're services or whether they're groups that you're looking to set up. It's the people that are going to use them the most are the ones that are key, and making sure that they're central to anything that's designed in your local community. I think I captured everything, but if I didn't, same as previously, pop it in the chat.
Brilliant. Thanks, Denise. That's really comprehensive. And I think that final thing you said about connection being so important, it links also to the strength of community, doesn't it, as well, about having those strong connections in order to support people within the community. So that's fantastic. I'm just going to move us on, just aware of time, to Donna from our room. Donna, are you happy to feedback?
Yeah, okay. Quickly, I'll just feed back. We were definitely saying one of the things that was a reflection for us was that one size doesn't fit all. That we need to give people options, you know, that we need to have this as part of the offer. It needs to just be part of the normal offer for everything that we do with people as part of their assessment, and that we shouldn't fit people into existing services. We should be looking at services which are needs-led and person-centred, I know we say that a lot, but it's more difficult to achieve. But actually, we've managed to do that with our little project. And I think the reason that we've been able to do that, I was just thinking about what the previous speaker said, is that you need to know each other's, you really need to know each other's strategies. So in Pennine Care, we've made it our business to know what the council's strategy is, because it's going to be, you're going to get much more bang for your buck if you go to the council and say to the council, we understand your strategy. Like I mentioned in my presentation about the Let's Do It strategy, I was able to speak to the council to their strategy and say, your strategy is about people feeling part of their community and community participation. We need to work with you for this to be delivered. So it's getting your partners on board. It's not just looking at this from a Pennine Care perspective or from a council perspective. It's seeing how each of you are going to meet what you both need to meet in order to make this work. So we talked about that offer. We talked about one of the barriers, particularly Daisy spoke about this in terms of one of the barriers is risk. I mentioned in my presentation about the fact we are going to have to look at the risks involved in expanding this to older people's services, just to make sure that people are safe. But we have to balance those risks. If people come across and say, don't think we could do this because the risks, that the behaviour is going to be such that we won't be able to manage it. We need to manage that risk and balance that with the person's quality of life. Because we always have to, there's going to be risks in everything we do in life. And as long as we can mitigate against it as much as we can, then we should be able to go ahead and be more creative in these offers that we have. In terms of pledges, we have somebody who works on a home treatment team at the moment who said that they were going to have a conversation with their colleagues in the next room from CMHT to see if they already do something like this. They may be aware of it, or it may well be that something hasn't been put on the paper yet. And then the other thing was seeing people in the community rather than asking them to come to the office. So going for a walk with people. We do that a lot in CMHT, actually. We do meet people outside and go for a walk with them rather than ask them to come here, because it is a nicer experience for both of you. So that's our feedback.
Brilliant. Thank you, Donna. I think you've encompassed that really, really well. Just want to summarise today's event just for a few minutes and then we'll close. I'm aware that we're sort of getting towards 1:30. Just really want to thank the speakers again today. I know I speak for everybody when I say that, you know, it was really moving to hear of people's experiences and how this work has been being put into practice. And I know in our group we were talking about, okay, what can we do to take this forward? And one thing that I've taken away is that we've all got a role to play in this, that we've all got something, whether it's just a conversation, whether it's advocating, whether it's something broader scale that we can do to support with people accessing their community and green spaces. So I really feel that that's something that we can take away today, and thinking about those connections and thinking about that person-centered practice. That we say this a lot in social work about person-centered practice, but what does that look like when we're trying to balance those risks that Donna has talked about as well? So there's a lot for us to go away and unpick, and hopefully you're all feeling energized and ready to do that. So I'm going to close now, but just to remind you, we're going to send out a list of resources from today's presentations alongside the speakers' emails. So if anyone wants to reach out following on from these presentations, then feel free to do that as well. So thank you so much for spending this hour and a half with us over lunch. Really appreciate it. Happy World Social Work Day, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.